Awesome. So welcome again, y'all, to today's webinar in which we're going to be talking through tips and advice on how to design winning applications to the USDA Local Agriculture Market Programs grants. And we're going to be focusing specifically today on the Local Food Promotion Program and the Regional Food System Partnership Grant. My name is Elizabeth Atwell. I'm a project manager with the Wallace Center, and I'm really thrilled to be joined today by a truly awesome lineup of speakers that are going to help you better understand these programs and specifically what grant reviewers are looking for and how you can design winning grant applications to support all of your really good work. Next slide. So this call is going to go for an hour and 15 minutes. So that's to 4:15 Eastern time or whatever time that is where you are. And in just a little bit, I'm going to hand things over to our colleagues from USDA who will talk through an overview of the USDA Regional Food System Partnership Grant and the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program grants. That's a mouthful, so sorry in advance if we're using acronyms like RFSP or LFPP to describe these. We're actually going to put in a handy dandy little acronym cheat sheet in the chat to help you out. After USDA presents, we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. Then my colleague Annalena is going to lead us in a conversation with 3 awesome former grant reviewers and also some former grantees to talk about what they learned sitting on the other side of this process, reading through and evaluating grant applications. We'll also do a Q&A with them, and then we'll close out with a reminder about some ways you can get involved in supporting these programs in the upcoming Farm Bill, as well as some other resources for your own grant writing journey. Next slide. One back. So this webinar is presented on behalf of the Wallace Center and the Food Systems Leadership Network. In case you're not familiar, the Wallace Center is a national nonprofit that brings together diverse peoples and ideas to co-create solutions that build healthy farms, equitable economies, and resilient food systems. Slide. We are the backbone organization for a national peer learning network, which is called the Food Systems Leadership Network, that aims to foster relationships of solidarity and of trust, to strengthen individual and collective leadership, catalyze innovation and collaboration across communities, and to advance racial equity both individually and systemically. All right, next slide. So why are we talking about land grants today? Well, one of the major reasons is that they are one of the biggest funding sources that we have to support the development of thriving local and regional food systems that build community wealth and power, that support local farms and food businesses, and that invest in sustainable farming and food systems. This year, there is $133 million available. That's a lot of millions. This is bigger than we've ever seen with these grants, and it's a huge and potentially transformative opportunity, and one that we want everyone to be able to take advantage of. But we all also know that these federal grants are not a cakewalk, right? They're not like these simple, philanthropy grants that maybe some of us have had some luck with in the past. I personally have applied for and managed several of these grants, so I can say firsthand they require a lot of investment of time, of people, of resources, of money even. You have to have 25% match just to even apply. So what this can result in sometimes is inequitable investments of how these public funds are being allocated, and this kind of vicious cycle where the highest capacity, most well-resourced organizations, often predominantly white organizations who already have a lot of capacity, are best positioned to write and win these grants, leaving less resource organizations that might need the money most worse positioned to apply for these grants. So we're here to try and disrupt that, and also to tell you that you can do this. You can apply for and be successful with these grants. USDA land grants are a little bit like those tests in high school where the teacher gives you the study guide beforehand and says, okay, this is exactly what you're going to be tested on. The grant applications are really long, yes. They're complicated, yes, but they also lay out precisely what reviewers are looking for. So the Food Systems Leadership Network is here to help you design proposals, both that check all of the boxes of what these grant reviewers are going to evaluate you on, and importantly, that also help you design programs that work towards fulfilling your mission and your values. So over the years, we've developed some really great resources, and our goal here is ultimately to help there be more and more equitable access to these important funding opportunities. Next slide. So one resource I want to be sure that you all check out right now is that the Food Systems Leadership Network is hosting a 4-part training series with Dr. Barrett Vaughn of Tuskegee University. And this training series focuses on reviewer-focused grant writing, particularly on the FMLFPP and RFSP grants we're going to be discussing today. Our first session was yesterday, and it was really awesome, but don't worry if you missed it, we can share the recording right here. And the second session is actually happening tomorrow at 3. So Dr. Vaughn, I saw you are on the call. Would you mind coming off mute for just a second and sharing just a tidbit about this training and what folks can expect to come away with?
Definitely, and thank you so much. I really appreciate that Wallace Center was gracious enough to ask me to do these workshops. The main focus of this workshop is that you be prepared for not only the LFPP and the RSFP, the aforementioned programs, but that you're able to be prepared for every other funding opportunity out there to come. We're really focusing on having grant writers to really determine what it is that they want to see done in the world, but being able to capture that down into what's actually fundable. And that's the primary purpose of this. So it's a 4-part series. The next session is going to be tomorrow, and then it'll conclude after Monday and Wednesday, and there'll be a Q&A after that. But really excited to see the people. We had a good response yesterday, and looking forward to more people joining. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Barrett. And again, I can't speak highly enough. Barrett is such an incredibly knowledgeable trainer and fun. So this is a great place to come, even if you feel really intimidated by these grants. We're hoping that to break it down in a way that you know that you can also do this. Additional information about this training, recording from this recording from other grant writing trainings and webinars, other tools and resources, all of that can be found on the Food Systems Leadership Network website, and will be shared to share that link with you in the chat and also as a follow-up to this call. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to hand things over to Patrick Kelly and Bailey Piercefield, both of whom are grants management specialists with USDA. They're going to start us off with an overview of the Regional Food System Partnership Grant, and then we'll get to hear from Matt Mosier and Bill Comstock, who will talk to us about LFPP. Real quick before I do, just 2 reminders. We're going to hold off on answering questions until the end, but feel free to add questions into the chat as they present. We'll try to get to as many as we can. But also keep in mind, USDA does 2 separate full-length webinars about these programs, the recordings of both of which are live. In those webinars, they go into a lot of depth in these programs that we're not going to be able to cover here, and they go into a lot of the technical details. So we will share those recordings out, but just keep that in mind when you're thinking about your questions. And if you have a question that's super specific about your program, or is this cost allowable, USDA grant staff are there to help, but we won't have time to get those today. So as you think about your questions, try and keep them broad enough to be applicable to everyone. Okay. With that in mind, I will hand things off to Patrick and to Bailey.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope the weather is sunny and bright wherever you are in the United States. We're going to talk about the Regional Food System Partnership Program. My name is Bailey Piercefield. I'm a grant management specialist who monitors and manages regional food system from the front to the back, open to close of the grants. All right. Can we start our slide, please? Thank you. So, like Elizabeth said, there's going to be a lot of information covered today, and I don't have the time to go through these slides word by word, so we're going to overview them. No worries. At the end of our slides, there is a slide that has all of the information you need, including the RFA, all the documents, and our email address that you can email us if you have any questions. So what is the Regional Food System Partnership Program? It supports the formation of multiple partnerships to plan and develop local and regional food systems. Next slide, please. Who is eligible to apply? So we have eligible partners and eligible entities. In order to apply for this grant, you have to have an agreement between one or more eligible entity and one or more eligible partner. Now in the RFA, we do list out what's considered an eligible entity. and an eligible partner. Also, to be eligible, you have to establish your project region. A region is defined as bigger than a neighborhood, but smaller than the entire country. Next slide, please. What does the Regional Food System Partnership fund? We focus on building capacity for decision-making, coordination of efforts, obtaining additional resources, and planning direction and needed activities. Other considered funded activities under this grant, which may not be considered under other USDA programs, are value chain coordination, conveying multiple types of partnerships and stakeholders, grant writing, and program exploration on behalf of partners and entities. Next slide, please. What do we not fund? What activities or projects are not eligible? So the purchase of farm equipment, tools, materials, and supplies. Construction and purchasing of land is not allowable under this grant. Benefiting one only agricultural organization, producer, or individual, and food is not allowed to be purchased under this grant program. Next slide, please. All right, so under the Regional Food System Partnership Program, we have 3 different project types. Of course, in the RFA, it's going to tell you a little bit more about each project type, but there are the 3 types. We have planning, implementation, and farm to institution, the amount of federal award allowed, and the duration of the grant project. Next slide, please. All right, well, I'm going to hand it over to my team lead at this point, Patrick Kelly.
Thanks, Bailey. And as Bailey and Elizabeth have both said, we're going through this information very quickly today, but we do have full-length webinars where the recordings are available on our website for you to go and hear a lot more in-depth information about each of the programs that you're going to be hearing about today. But we just want to let you know, for the purposes of RFSP, there are some priority considerations that we consider at the administrative review phase of the review process. So those are listed here. I'm not going to read them out word for word, but when you're filling out your application, you want to be sure that you're reviewing the priority considerations that are in that application form and checking which one you're trying to apply under. And then in the process of writing your application, you want to include data and information in your application that proves or shows evidence for whatever priority consideration you're applying under. Next slide, please. There is a cash match requirement for RFSP. You'll hear Matt and Bill talk about LFPP here in a second. There's also a match requirement for their program. The difference between the two is that for RFSP, it's specifically a cash requirement. So yeah, the applicant is required to bring a minimum 25% cash match total of the total amount of the federal portion of the grant. So for example, if the application is requesting $500,000 in grant funds, the partnership must provide at least $125,000 in cash contributions as part of that application. I'll talk more about match verification letters here in a second. Just to note that in-kind match contributions are also allowable under RFSP. They don't help meet the requirement, the 25% requirement, but we do take into consideration anything above and beyond the 25% as part of the priority considerations that I just mentioned on the previous slide. Next slide, please. So we get this question a lot. What's the difference between a cash match contribution and an in-kind contribution? The important things to consider when determining whether or not you can count something as a cash match is that it has to be an actual cash contribution to the project from either the applicant's general reserves or revenue lines, from third-party partners, or from other non-federal grants. So it can't just be the value of somebody's time that they're dedicating towards the project. And that's where the second bullet comes in, especially. In order for something to be considered a cash match contribution for the project, there has to be an accounting line specifically for those funds and showing that those funds are specifically dedicated to the project itself. So again, I could talk about this for several more minutes, but I don't have the time to here today. But that's the primary thing to consider when you're looking at your cash match versus an in-kind contribution is, are you able to show the documentation within your accounting system that shows those funds are accounted for as cash dedicated to the project? Next slide, please. We did do some updates to our outcomes and indicators. So those of you who are familiar with AMS grant applications, you'll understand what I mean when I talk about outcomes and indicators. There's a section on the application where you're required to select at least one outcome and indicator for your project from a list of preset outcomes and indicators. We did do a formal review of these performance measures this past year. This is the third year of the RFSP program. So we had some of our previous applicants and previous grant recipients work with us in a focus group to come up with some revised outcomes and indicators that we feel are more in line with the statutory purpose of the program, and actually allows the recipient to report on activities that are being done during the period of performance, as opposed to things that might have occurred after the period of performance is over and the grantee has trouble reporting on things that haven't happened yet. So for those of you who have applied previously in previous years for RFSP, you'll notice that these are actually different on this year's application. So we just want to give people a heads up on that. Next slide, please. Yeah, I just talked about that. Sorry. Next slide, please. So here are the tips that we want to make sure everybody understands coming out of a presentation like this today. These are, again, covered in our longer webinar, but it's really important that you read the entire RFA as you're getting ready to fill out an application for the program. And that goes for any grant application that you're filling out. You really want to understand what the parameters are, what the eligibility criteria are for the program, so that you're sure you are eligible to apply for the grant. And then, as Elizabeth mentioned, we actually list the criteria that the review panels are going to be using for their independent panel reviews in the RFA itself, so you can see what the review panelists are going to be looking at. It's listed there bullet by bullet. You want to get input from partners for this award. Obviously, you don't want to just be the primary applicant writing the application on behalf of a partnership without getting that kind of input. You want to describe the expected results from the partnership and regional food system perspectives rather than the individual entities that make up the partnership. Be sure to answer every question in the narrative. And this happens quite a bit as well. If the contact information for the application changes during the application period, which does happen, you should contact us and let us know, because there have been times where we've come back to people after the application period to get more information, and the people who submitted the application are no longer there. So that's an issue. Next slide, please. The match verification letters and the budget summary table, all your pieces in your budget on your application, you want to make sure those are all lined up and in sync. There are different stages of the application when you're filling in your budget information where you'll be entering information twice, unfortunately. And several times when we're doing an admin review of an application, we'll see that those numbers actually are different between one place and another. So we need to go back and get that fixed. You want to be sure you're calculating your indirect costs accurately. And we're here to help you through that process. If you've never calculated indirect costs for a grant application before, our team can actually walk you through how to do that if you reach out to us through the email address that you're going to see here in just a second. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the schedule. You can read that at your leisure, but just be sure that you get your application submitted no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern on the 2nd of May. That is a hard deadline. It's a system deadline. And once that time passes, you will not be able to submit your application via grants.gov, and we will not be able to accept it. Next slide, please. Here are the helpful links that Bailey was talking about. You can always refer back to these. The webinar link is also located there. So if you wanted to go and listen to the full webinar for RFSP or for LFPP, you can always do that. Next slide, please. And then here's the email address that I was referring to earlier. If you send an email to that address, someone will get back to you within 24 hours. We have 5 people on my team, so there's 6 of us total. One of us is checking that address every single day. So if you send something there, we'll be sure to get back to you and answer your question for you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to my colleagues with the Local Food Promotion Program.
Thanks, Patrick. So I'm Matt Mosier, and with me also is Bill Comstock. We're with the FMLFPP program. It's the Farmers Market Local Food Promotion Program. Next slide. So Bill and I handle the states of Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Arkansas, Missouri, and Colorado. I think I've got all those. So FMLFPP is a competitive grant program to increase the consumption of locally and regionally agricultural food products. And it also assists in developing new market opportunities for farmers. So one of the key takeaways there is that the FMLFPP program funding is all post-harvest. It doesn't fund things like growing crops or raising animals or anything like that. Next slide. So there's really two components to FMLFPP. There's the Farmers Market Promotion Program, and the other component is the Local Food Promotion Program. And the key difference there is that FMPP farmers sell directly to consumers. So a typical applicant there would be maybe a farmer's market. Whereas LFPP farmers sell indirectly to consumers. And that's typically through a local or regional food business, such as a food hub, a wholesaler, a processor, or someone like that. And so a common question that we get is, I'm going to submit one application. Can I combine FMPP activities with LFPP activities? And the answer is, please don't do that. If you're going to submit an application, either you can submit one to FMPP and you can also submit one to LFPP, but don't combine the applications. Next slide. So LFPP project types, planning is pretty self-explanatory. You could be doing maybe a feasibility study or business plan. Maybe you need technical assistance with food transportation. Whereas implementation, you're actually doing something like expanding market channels. Maybe you're expanding a food hub, or maybe you're doing route optimization for food transportation. So a common question here with implementation is, can we do construction or remodel a building? And the answer to that is no. Construction is not covered under the program, or it's not funded through the program. So farm to institution is kind of a combo between planning and implementation, but it deals strictly with institutional type activities, things like K through 12, hospital cafeterias, and things like that. Next slide. And so new for 2023 is the turnkey marketing and promotion. This particular program has a streamlined application process, and you want to make sure that you pick at least 3 of the 5 predefined activities. And you don't want to add any additional activities, otherwise your application could get disqualified. So follow the RFA very carefully if you're thinking about applying under this new program in 2023. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
All right, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. First thing I want to say out the gate is to mirror Elizabeth's comment, is that you can do this, whether it's LFPP or any of our programs at USDA, you can do this. And so as far as, I think if you could advance the slide to the FMPP, they kind of mirror. I'm not going to go spend a whole lot. They mirror the ones that Matt covered. So next slide, please. This turnkey program, and again, both FMPP and LFPP, we're excited because this is the first year and we hope it's going to streamline the project and bring on projects in both programs that with those individuals that struggle with where to start on bringing it. It's more of a cookie cutter type approach. So again, you need to pick the predefined activities within that, and then you need to stay within that framework that is outlined. So next slide, please. And again, it just kind of mirrors Patrick's comments. Our award timeline on both programs is May 2nd. Our application due date's coming up. And then through the May through August, we go through our peer review and then administrative review in August and September, with the hope to get the awards out in that September-October timeframe. Next slide, please. I'd spend a minute on this slide. If you go back and review these project evaluation criteria, as you put your project together, focus on these points here. And I guess to say it another way is, focus on your project and your work plan and how that all drives. Said another way is sometimes there's superfluous data that's put in that sometimes loses the focus on that. And when that gets to peer review or administrative review, it loses focus on the project. So next slide, please. So common mistakes, too many objectives, unclear objectives, including unallowable costs. So again, within this whole process, read the RFA, review our webinars, review our frequently asked questions, because all these are outlined in there, are not specific or concise in the project, and or deleting or editing other information within the narrative. And so again, as you put your package together, focus on the required items that are supposed to be in there. Consider whether or not you want to add in the additional, because sometimes view is superfluous, and I question, then this is just me talking, that sometimes that loses the focus on the actual project. So next slide, please. So here is our helpful links as well, both for FMPP and LFPP, and you can link to those on our website. Next slide. And then we also have an email, and we have 12 specialists that we are watching that email, and we can help you with answer some questions as you put your package together. Next slide. And that's it on that. So I guess at this point we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Matthew, Patrick, and Bailey. And shout out to all of these folks and everyone at USDA that is standing up these programs. I think it's important to remind ourselves that without these public servants, we might not have these programs, right? So these people, especially this time of year, are putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that all of us can apply for and get funding to support our work. So thank you all, and thank you for taking the time to go through this. We already had a couple of questions coming in from the chat. A few were answered. And I do just want to reiterate what both Bill and Patrick were saying about the emails that are listed here. Again, we'll follow up with all of that information in an email to everyone after this. But I know a lot of you probably have some very specific questions, like, is this cost allowable? We can't get to those today, but again, their staff, their team is there to help. So please do continue to reach out to them and ask those specific questions. In the meantime, I want to start off with just a couple of questions. We'll see what we can get through. Please keep adding them into the chat. We'll see what we can get to. So first is a question for Patrick and Bailey about partnerships within the Regional Food System Partnership Grant. And are there requirements or expectations around like the ideal number of partners that should be included, or how should folks be demonstrating how long they've been collaborating? What are reviewers looking for in evaluating the strength and number of partnerships?
So yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just quickly kind of answer the first part. So in terms of the expectations, there's not really an expectation. There is a statutory requirement. And Bailey mentioned it briefly in one of her slides that the partnership needs to be made up of at least one eligible entity and one eligible partner. And those terms are defined in the RFA. And there are actually tables in the RFA that list the types of entities that could, the types of organizations that could fit in each of those categories. So it's a minimum of two, one from each table, basically. In terms of the ideal, I think what the reviewers will talk more about this during their presentation here in a second, but I think what the reviewers look for and what we ask them to look for is is the breadth of the partnership equal to the work that's being proposed in the application. So if they're talking about doing 7 or 8 objectives for their project, but they only have 3 partners listed in their partnership, is that a realistic kind of ratio between here are the partners that are involved in the partnership, but here's the amount of work that we're proposing we're going to be doing. So you want to be sure that when you're writing your application, when you're writing your narrative, that the work and the activities that you're talking about doing reflect the type of partners and the breadth of the partnership that you have involved in the project itself. So, there are things like partnership commitment letters that you need to submit. There's a table in the application narrative that you fill out that tells us who your main partners are and what their role is on the project. So all that information is asked for and gathered, and the reviewers are going to look at that and determine, as part of their review process, I forget which section they're actually scoring it, but I think it's expertise and partners. But they'll actually give their assessment as subject matter experts, whether or not what is being proposed in terms of the work is equal to, or in value to, the types of partners and the number of partners that are being proposed in the partnership itself. So, that would be my suggestion, is just making sure that, you're not saying too many things about the amount of work you're going to be doing, but you only have a few partners. And the last thing on that I want to mention is one of the priority considerations for the program is to bring a diverse, as having a relevant and diverse set of partners on the project. And so we take that and we look at that ourselves as AMS staff during the administrative review process to see whether or not the partnership itself is legitimate in terms of who's involved and what their level of involvement is based on the amount of work that they're proposing they want to try to do.
Awesome, thank you. That was such a solid answer, Patrick. I appreciate that. Building off of this question of partnerships, this is for Matt and Bill. This most recent question in the chat, in LFPP, can you explain the difference between key partner and collaborator and whether funds are required to be directed to both?
Yeah, so partner is somebody that has a close relationship with the recipient in terms of helping directly with the project. Whereas a collaborator doesn't necessarily have that relationship, but keep in mind that in our RFA, we do not require that those folks are actually subawarded or contracted out funds. So you can have a partner that works closely on that project and like that, but they don't necessarily have to be paid with grant funds.
Okay, great, thank you. We got a lot of questions about match, and some of them are very specific. So again, please email USDA staff with those questions. But here's one about timing with match. Is it possible to secure match after the grant application has been submitted, but before it has been awarded, or is documentation showing that those funds have already been secured? Is that part of the application?
Who may take that, Matt? Or
No, do you want to answer for LFPP first, or do you want me to, Bill? Sorry.
go ahead, Patrick.
So yeah, for RFSP, we do require that you secure the cash match requirement and submit the information, submit the match verification letters, and reflect all of that in your budget information on your application. So while it is possible to make some changes once the award has been made, we do need that information as part of your application to be assessed as part of the evaluation process. So it has to be secured at the time that you apply.
And I'll mirror that with what Patrick said for LFPP. We do some modifications later, but what I'd point out to you is that this is a very competitive award process. So leaving something out like that, you're at risk of, because you're competing with others who have. So I'll leave it at that. But in general, we want to see it coming in to the program.
Great. Thank you all for that clarification, and acknowledging we could have a whole separate webinar and just talk about match. This is a big issue, right? And this is when we're talking about equitable access to these funds, this is like the biggest wall, right? If you don't, you got to have money to make money.
Absolutely.
So just thank you for that answer, and just do want to honor that that is a very major hurdle for a lot of people. A couple more questions. These turnkey and grants under LFPP, they seem to have a pretty explicit focus on marketing. Could you give an example of the type of marketing programs that are intended or allowable under these turnkey grants?
Yeah, so an example could be, you could be somebody that's an aggregator of, let's say, a food agricultural product, and you are marketing to maybe restaurants to purchase more of those products. So part of that could be this marketing plan. It could be the production of marketing materials and like that to expand the market for that particular product. And it is, keep in mind that during the presentation, just keep in mind that there are 5 key activities there. So we don't want folks adding to that, and you have to use a minimum of 3 of those activities.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a question here in the chat about flexibility with start and end dates. Is it possible for the start date to be something other than September 30th, or are all projects expected to start on the same timeline?
You can start your project whenever you'd like, once the award has been made, but for the purposes of the application and the submission of the application and our systems, basically, we would list your start date as what was submitted and what was requested for on the application. So it may have a start date of September 30th, 2023, and that'll be what's reflected in the system. But you can start your project in October, November, December if you really needed to or wanted to. But for system purposes, it would have to read as the official start date.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Patrick. And for what it's worth, just a tip from me to you is to build in a couple of months at least at the start of these projects. These are big programs to get off the ground, especially you have a lot of partnerships. You might have complicated budgets, you might have complicated evaluation systems. So if you are like, all right, the program is going to start on October 1st, you might be in a world of pain. So give yourself the grace of having enough time to really work with your partners and work with your organizations to set yourself up for success. Okay, one last question, then we got to move on. This is kind of like the partnership question. I think we're always trying to find what is the Goldilocks number of the right amount of objectives. Any parameters, any suggestions, like what would be too few objectives and where would it be too much?
So for FMLFPP, 3 objectives, 3 to 4 is probably the sweet spot. And part of that is that for each one of those objectives, you are providing outcomes and measures in your work plan and in the project narrative. So in that 3 to 4 is probably the sweet spot. And that's probably what we see the most of.
Great. I'm sure there's a ton more questions here. Again, we'll reshare the emails that Bill, Matthew, Patrick, and Bailey shared. Please lean on them. They're a great resource. Their team is a really important resource. But for now, we want to shift gears and hear from both some former reviewers and grantees. So I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Annalena, to get us started there.
Great. Well, that was an awesome first half of the call. So thank you all so much for the rapid fire information session on these grants. Like Elizabeth said, I'm Annalena with the Wallace Center. And in this second half of the webinar, we're going to hear from a few folks who have sat on review panels for different LAMP grants and who have applied for and managed the grants, and some who have doubled as both an applicant as well as a reviewer. So super excited to be joined today joined with Lori Wayne with the Open Food Network, Kelly Crane with Farmer Food Share, and Renee Catakalos with the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Funders. So we really hope that by hearing from folks who have that lived and real experience with both the writing and the reviewing of these grants, y'all can gain some good tips and ideas for crafting proposals that advance your organization's mission while also resonating with the review committee. So to kick us off in this section, just want to hear from each of you guys in a quick introductions and maybe a little bit about your experience with these grants. So feel free, whoever is feeling called to kick us off. Lori, looks like you just unmuted.
I totally unmuted. I always go first.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hey, so I am so grateful to the USDA and to the Wallace Center for doing this. And I've been a grant recipient, an unsuccessful proposer, a review panel member, and a review panel chair. And every step of the way, I've felt nothing but support from the USDA and from folks like you. And I think one thing to really remember is like the USDA and the reviewers really do want you to be successful in your project. So that's kind of my background. It's kind of every little piece of the way, and I'm super happy to be here and spout my opinions. I'm going to pass it off. Check.
Thanks, Lori.
Hi, I can go next. I'm Kelly Crane. I'm the Executive Director of Farmer Food Share here in lovely Durham, North Carolina. I have been, Farmer Food Share is a regional food hub, and we're operating a LFPB grant currently, but prior to this, I was the Executive Director of the Oregon Farmers Markets Association, and before that, the ED of the West Virginia Farmers Markets Association. So throughout these years, I've had many LFPP and FMPP grants that I've written and managed, and they've been really transformational for the organizations that I've worked with. And I've also reviewed both programs several times. I have not reviewed a turnkey grant yet. I think maybe that's a new one, so I can't talk about that, but I've written a lot of them, and like Lori, I didn't ever have one that was rejected, but I had one that I look back and I'm like, how did that get funded? I was so lucky. So it's such a very hyper-specific body of knowledge. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share that with others, because we don't want any more gatekeeping than necessary, right? So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Catakalos. I'm Vice President for Strategy and Impact with Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Funders. So we're a 501c3 that serves as kind of a convening space and a learning space for private philanthropy that is supporting sustainable agriculture and food systems. So a lot of the folks who are providing the grant matches or who can be partners on RFSP and those kinds of things. So I have in the past been a part of FMPP and LFPP grant kind of pulling together for farmers markets and urban agriculture projects that I've been on the boards of here in the greater Washington, DC region. And I have obviously been involved with a lot of kind of private philanthropy work. And for the past 3 years, I've been an RFSP reviewer. So we'll, be bringing that the perspective to the comments here. So I'm really glad to. We're always glad to partner with the Wallace Center on these things, and really, trying to activate private philanthropy and USDA to really kind of both bring the pieces they can bring to these programs to leverage them in the most effective ways especially for groups that have not traditionally been getting a lot of the funding. So really excited to be here today too.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. We have a lot of good perspectives in the room. Before we get into some advice for crafting your application, I was hoping if one of you could speak a little bit about your experience as a reviewer and just like what that peer review process is like. The evaluation criteria is pretty explained in the RFAs, but that peer review process is maybe a little bit more cloudy. If someone just wants to share a little bit about that to get us all grounded before we jump into the application pieces, that would be awesome.
I'm happy to do that. That's okay with Lori and Renee. In my experience, they have recruited reviewers, they put a call out, they've assembled teams of around 3 to 4 people. They do a good job of trying to balance the skill sets and experiences of the folks who are on the group. And then they assign a group captain to the peer review phase. And so that captain kind of wrangles everybody else. They give us a scoring rubric, which is the exact rubric that they give you in the RFA. It is like 5 points possible for this, 15 points possible for this. They give us some guidelines around scoring those. The team captain kind of wrangles us all to give our scores. And then together we sit down with our individual scores and come up with consensus scores for the team. It'll be 3 to 4 people on the team, and it'll be between 8 and 12 applications. And then we rank them, and we're really clear, like this was our favorite, this was our consensus. We adjust scores as necessary to make everything make sense, to develop that consensus. And then we send them back to the AMS team. I think what happens next, and the AMS team can jump in with this, I think that they kind of go around and take every team's first ranked one, and then they probably start going around with the second ranks to account for differences in the way teams score things. But you'd have to, that's what I suspect, but you'd have to confirm. Also, the groups are regional. And so I think that AMS, in an attempt to distribute funds equitably across the US, groups the things regional. So it might be like you have all of the Southeast, or you have like these 2 states over here and these 2 states over here, because there weren't as many applications. But so you're kind of competing with a pool of your peers in your region. You never really know where those lines are going to be drawn, though. I think that's a concise explanation.
Thanks, Kelly. Lori or Renee want to, jump in.
I would just add to that final bit. And I don't know that this is true, but this is my perspective from what I've seen. As Kelly said, you will score a regionally connected group, but that is not in your own region. So, our scoring team are people in one region, and then the proposals we're scoring all come from a different region.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things to add. One, the very beginning of the process, the reviewers sign a conflict of interest. So everybody makes sure that they don't have some kind of connection with the applicants. And secondly, at the end there, the comments are also by consensus. So that is a really beautiful process, really kind of coming up. There's a lot of times there's a really big space between what different reviewers think about a proposal. And I noticed that Melanie put a link to become a reviewer, and I can't say this enough. If you're qualified, apply to become a reviewer. It's an amazing process.
Yeah. And there is a lot of that discussion and consensus building with your fellow reviewers. So Yeah, definitely double down on that encouragement. This is a fantastic opportunity, especially if you have that expertise and knowledge with food systems development, to be on that other side of things. All right, let's get into some of the fun questions here. So we are a month out from when these grants are due, which is crazy. So what are some, just general pointers as folks are putting together their applications, both from y'all's experience writing different grants, as well as what you're looking for as reviewers? Like, what is maybe one or two key tips that you might want to share with folks on the call today as they continue crafting their proposals?
I'll pitch in. I would say, especially now, like the clock is ticking. So establish a schedule and as many people giving you feedback on your grant proposal as is practical. And they don't have to be people on your actual project team, because you want your proposal to make sense. And sometimes when you've been living in it for months, you say things that are kind of out of context. So get lots of reviewers and get them on a schedule, so you're getting feedback that you can integrate and polish your proposal before you submit it. And the second thing is just check in with your partners. Everybody has partners, and just make sure they understand what they're signing up for, and make sure that they're the right partners and they're firmly committed to your project.
I hear you. Getting fresh eyes is never a bad thing, and clear communications with your partners.
Yeah, I would jump in to say that also just being sure that your partners are really like true partners and are really on board and haven't just been added to kind of pad your proposal. It's usually pretty easy to tell when that's happening. So I would really encourage people to have those conversations up front, so that people really do understand what their roles are in this partnership and that it's the right partnership. One thing that sometimes happens is that you will see, and I'm speaking just about the RFSP, which is really about building partnerships specifically, that sometimes we'll see maybe a larger resource organization or a broader kind of organization come in with a lot of more kind of on the ground or BIPOC-led kind of partners presenting support letters. But you might also see in that same group of applications a proposal led by one or more of those organizations on the ground that have been asked to come in underneath another project. And almost invariably, the work that the groups are proposing to lead themselves is different from the kind of work they're being asked to come in and support by other organizations. And usually it's more relevant to what that group is really trying to achieve. So I think it's really important to think about who's leading and who's being partners in these kinds of things, and the specific roles, or even, kind of co-leading kinds of things that are being played there. And keeping in mind that people may be on multiple proposals. And so that's competitive as well. It looks less good for your proposal to have someone on it who's also leading their own proposal that is stronger somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's that reminder of asking yourself too, like, are we the right organization?
I have a couple of things that I've found useful over the years. When in doubt, ask the AMS staff and do it. Don't wait until the last day. Do it weeks beforehand and not 1 week or 3 days beforehand. They're very nice and they will answer your questions. Just give them time because they're humans. I budget 80 to 120 man hours for putting together a successful LFPP grant application. And that's counting like all the time you put together, helping your draft your partner letters, make your budget, write your thing. So I've seen a lot of grant applications. I'm like, I know this person spent like 20 to 40 hours on this, and that was a total waste of time because they didn't have the amount of time dedicated to this. So like, if you don't have the time to put it together, either write something really lean and mean that you can really well evidence and stick to that, or like save it for next time instead of wasting time. I'd say that you may or may not know this, you don't get any points for asking for like less money. So if you're, as long as you're within the allowable range for the implementation or capacity or whatever you're doing, you don't get less point. They want to see that it's a right size. Reviewers want to see that all of the cost of the grant that you're proposing is right size for the scale and impact and activities that you're going to do, not that it's like lower or higher. So in the review phase, the amount of money that is asked for is not taken into consideration, other than when people score the budget about, you know, what a good job they did putting together the budget. I'd say make a work back plan, starting from submitting that grant 2 days before it's due to a week before that, having all your partner letters in hand to like work outside in, because you could be tuning up that project narrative that last night if you need to, but you can't force your partners to get those letters back signed if you didn't give them enough time. So I'd have a work back plan that focuses outside in, after you set the core of your project, obviously. And also I put a lot of things in attachments. That 30-page limit or 29-page limit or whatever it is, that is firm and it is real. And if people go over that as a reviewer, I don't know what to do with it. Like if it's 35 pages, do I like toss out the other 5? The AMS staff doesn't give you guidance around that. So what I like to do is just stay really focused and give a lot of space to that, to the narrative piece and to all of the pieces in there. But if I need to make an attachment with like copies of all of my resumes for my key partners, I will do that. If I can't really fit all the budget detail that I know they want to really evidence my project in that, I might create a budget detail attachment that's separate from the, not that I don't fill out those forms, but I say attachment. So I put a lot of information in the attachments if I don't have room for it. So I stick to the page limits. That's just something I've used in the past. I didn't know I could do that until I reviewed it and I saw other people had done it. So now you know that. Yeah, I think those are the major like hot tips I have.
Another reason to be a reviewer, you get to learn more about what other folks are, you know, how to get that good proposal to a great proposal. And I just wanted to acknowledge this comment in the chat from Charles as well around that work back plan, like build in time for technical difficulties. You know, as you heard USDA say before, like 11:59, they're not going to go over to 12:01 the next day. Their system shuts down. And so having space for if the power goes out or if your internet stops, build those contingencies in as well. So you guys have been talking a bit around, you know, some tips. In your time as reviewers, have there been some key characteristics that you've noticed across successful proposals that have really moved that proposal from like, this is pretty good to they really deserve this and could do an excellent job with these funds? Anything that sticks out to anyone? Renee, you look like you're nodding.
Yeah, I was just going to say on RFSP, one thing that that really sticks out is when there is a clear understanding of what building partnerships is versus like doing regional work. So knowing the difference between whether your project, some of the projects I've seen really are more like LFPP projects that are about we're a group of people and we're doing this work versus we're a group of people doing this work, but we want to start connecting with some other people in our region who are doing these other pieces of work. And we need some support to get the space and the time and the infrastructure to make those larger connections happen. So, and I think there's been certainly a learning curve on RFSP because it's completely different and it's less like tangible, hard, you know, things that you are doing requirement than other USDA programs are. So when you can really understand how you can expand the capacity of your region under that one, I think that kind of stands out. And often when some of those partners have some pre-existing either connections or they clearly have different parts of the puzzle and are wanting to bring them together. So there's the capability to do parts of this are already there, and you know that if they can work together, that they're going to go much further. And then one other thing I would just say to that I've seen that has often been a problem is the attempt to create regions that are non-geographic. I know that they defined in the beginning that a region is anything larger than a neighborhood and anything smaller than the entire country. So that's a big spread, but trying to create a region that is really based on some kind of issue or expertise connection can be really tenuous. So try to have a real definable geographic region that makes sense.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I was recalling one of the slides earlier that USDA had highlighted the partnerships. Partnerships is a key piece of these regional food systems partnerships programs. So don't forget, strengthening that is key to these grants. Kelly, it looked like you were about to chime in here too.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I'm fascinated by the RSFP process. So thank you, Renee. So I'd say for LFPP and FMPP projects, the grants that always float to the top are the ones that tell this really compelling story. There's like a narrative involved with them that's like really clear, and all the details are there. So like there's this really clear alignment with the legislative purpose of it's like this matches the legislative purchase to blank by doing like it's really easy to write that sentence because it's really highly aligned. I'll say you should just write that sentence in there and explain that. It's the purpose of the program is there, the need and the opportunity. Like it's like, here's the need, here's the challenge, but also here's the opportunity. And here's how my approach is gonna bridge that gap between need and opportunity, right? In a way that's aligned with the purpose of this grant. Why are you the right organization to do it, right? Like, why are you credible? Why do you have the support of all your partners and stakeholders to do this? Like, why are you the right person to do this work? It has this really strong work plan. I can see exactly how you're gonna start and finish and work your way through. It's a really strong team. It seems like the people are really credible, really strong evidence of stakeholder need and wants. So like, you could have a strongly evidenced narrative that's like, if you were a higher ed institution, you could be like, here's all the data around why there's this need and opportunity. But if that's all I see, and I don't see like a farmer sign-on letter or letters from the community partners, I wonder, I'm like, is this something you're just like pulling out of data? And then when you take this money, it's not going to really, the need isn't really there with the people you're really going to meet, so I want to see the evidence, both like the high level evidence and like also like that evidence of like support of the actual humans it's going to impact, right? And that the budget is clear and reasonable, and it's connected to the things that somebody asked the question, like, does it raise red flags if you see a lot of like equipment leaks? And I'm like, well, are you starting a new food hub? Maybe that's really aligned with what you're doing. Is it allowable? In that case, but if it's like really equipment heavy, but the whole grant is around marketing, then I would like wonder about that. So like the pieces of the budget, I should look at the budget and it should tell me the same story that the rest of your application is telling me. I'd say too, just like a couple more things. Don't skip those small sections like dissemination. There are points there and you will lose them if you skip them. And yeah, don't try to claim. So I do not believe in matching requirements. I think that they just make the gap in under-resourced institutions and communities bigger, but I understand they are a part of this project. And as a reviewer, when I am looking at a proposal that shows an in-kind match, and it's really kind of two different projects wearing a trench coat to make that match happen, that will raise eyebrows. So make sure that your match is real, and that you're not trying to claim that this other project that's not really a part of your project is part of it. People will notice that. Yeah. Oh, and in the outcomes indicators sections, just a great application has outcomes indicators that match up with the impacts you're saying. So if you have a farmer's market project that's all about increasing sales at your farmer's markets, but you don't say that you're going to collect sales data, that would like raise red flags for me. So you don't have to collect every single impact measure, especially if you tell me why that's not relevant to you. But like, if it's relevant to your project, you should put it in there. And if not, you're going to get marked way down on that. That's it.
Keep going back to what y'all are saying around the right size program, right size budget, right size partnerships. Lori, why don't you add some key characteristics you've seen?
I love what both Kelly and Renee were saying. That's so bang on. I think for us, just keeping in mind as you're doing your proposal that what we're looking for is the right fit. So make sure that your proposal is clarity is so key. It's a fit for the program that you're applying for, and that your organization and your wider group of stakeholders and partners are a good fit for the proposal. So like really look at what you want to get done and make sure that it plugs into the right program. That's and plus whatever they said.
Wonderful. Well, we just have about 1 minute left in this section, which is so unfortunate because y'all have been sharing so many good pieces of advice here. To close out this panel, do y'all just want to share like one tip or one piece of advice that if you knew then what you know now, what would that have been?
I got one. Please pay attention to the evaluation criteria. We really that's what we look at, and go front to back because things are weighted differently. And sometimes don't go to the end of your proposal and be all pooped out and put one paragraph in a section that has, 15% of your whole review score. So, and realize that everybody really wants you to be successful. That's what I got.
Great. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah, I think apropos to the point I just put in the chat is that the reviewers really do read the entire proposal. So like you don't want to get to the end and be like pooped out. And also you don't want to blow your whole wad at the beginning and then you're like not answering the questions that are subtly different near the end. So, spread it out and give all aspects of it, kind of equal weight if you can. People really are reading everything. And as I said earlier, it really is literally just graded on the rubric that you have seen to start with. So there's like no trick questions. It's, what you've seen is what you get and what we score on.
Great. Thanks, Renee.
I would say the rubric thing also, and the work back schedule, being realistic about it. But the other thing I didn't know until I reviewed is that the skill sets are so diverse on the committees, and the committees vary widely. Having talked to other friends of mine who have also served on these review committees, you cannot assume that the person reading you should assume that the person reading your application is super smart, but also maybe not an expert in the exact thing you're talking about. And so don't use acronyms that you don't explain. Don't assume people, something that you think of as an industry where you're obviously at all farmers markets, this thing is important. The person reading your application may not know that. So you'll need to provide evidence for almost everything, basically. So just think of the person that is reading your application as being very generally smart and informed, but may not be an expert, because it might be someone from the NIH, it might be a farmer's market expert, and it might be someone who's a community organization runner, and you might have a food hub application, right?
Yeah. That's a great piece of advice. And I've seen a lot of head nods between Renee and Lori as well, as don't make any assumptions, that folks know exactly what you're talking about. Great. Well, I'm sorry to have to cut this off, but Renee and Kelly and Lori, thank you all both so much, or all three of you so much, for hopping on here and sharing some tips with us. To come off to this next section here, these programs are all funded through the Farm Bill, which comes up every few years for debate. And this is one of those years. So I'm going to hand this over now to Hannah Quigley with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition to talk a little bit more about how to get involved in ensuring that this upcoming Farm Bill still makes time and funds for these important programs. So Hannah, go for it.
Thanks so much. Are y'all able to share the last slide too?
I think so. Hold
okay,
tight.
no problem. I know, yeah, I'll reference a few. resources on that slide, but I'm just thankful for the excellent overview that USDA staff provided, the insight from reviewers, really continuing to learn over here as myself. And thanks to the Wallace Center for allowing us to share just this timely policy advocacy opportunity. My name is Hannah Quigley, and I'm a policy specialist with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. We are a grassroots member-based coalition that covers federal food and ag policy nationwide. And so many of you are aware of the USDA funding opportunities that are available annually, but maybe not as familiar with the Farm Bill and the fact that the local agriculture market program and all of its grant programs, so the ones that we reviewed today, in addition to the value-added producer grants, those are all, created under the Farm Bill, but they continue to be updated, and all of its funding is controlled through the Farm Bill as well. It is the year. The Farm Bill, Congress writes the Farm Bill once every 5 years, and this year it is up for reauthorization again. And so we are still in the early phase of this process. So we're still in it, and Congress is still in an information gathering phase and a listening mode. So it makes it for an opportune time to be sure you share your own priorities about the programs to your members of Congress. Elizabeth, you mentioned at the top of the call that this year there's $133 million available in funding for the grants, but the funding will change. So next year it will actually revert back to those more historic levels. And so funding that's authorized through the Farm Bill is closer to around $30 million for these grant opportunities. So it's a big difference. And this is then your time where you may advocate for more funding for the programs. So perfect timing. If you're interested in learning more about the Farm Bill as a whole, what's in it, and the timing process as it'll unfold later this year, you can look at the bit.ly shortened link on the left side of the slide. If you want to just stay up to date on what's happening in Congress and in DC, you can sign up for our weekly updates. It's just once on Fridays, and it covers, any critical updates coming out of the federal policy landscape, as well as some federal funding opportunities as well. We usually share out around USDA funding opportunities. And then the last two links down here are for the Agricultural Senate Committee. The Senate Agricultural Committee and the House Agricultural Committee. So they both have online forms available right now on their website where you can submit your priorities really easily through there. And I will just say that they will not be open much longer because we will start to transition out of this learning and listening mode, and they will begin to draft the Farm Bill. I will drop my email in the chat just in case you have any questions. You feel free to reach out to me, and you'll have all these links as well when the slides are shared. And that's all I have. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, and huge shout out to Hannah and everyone at the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition for being such strong advocates for all of this work always, but particularly right now as we move towards the next Farm Bill. Did y'all learn something today? Anyone? Did we learn? Okay, I want to hear. Oh, are we doing a poll? I'm trying to do the poll, y'all. Annalena, are you able to do it? Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. We're gonna launch a little poll. I want to know if you learned something that's valuable today. We often kind of put these webinars on the fly, so we want to make sure that we're continuing to do what is helpful for y'all. I'm not seeing that come through.
It's hard to see sometimes, but we're at 51 responses and 100% of people have said yes, they have learned something new. So I'll take that as a success. And thanks for taking the time to fill out the poll.
Yeah, thanks. That's what we love to hear. I had a friend of mine the other day ask me a question. She's thinking about getting into nonprofit work, and she was like, so what's the deal with grant writing though? Isn't that kind of a drag? Don't you have to like always be writing grants? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, you do kind of have to always be writing grants, but let's see, grant writing is, you have this incredible, powerful mission and set of values about how you want to create a better future. And then you get with brilliant, awesome people and you talk about how you can collaborate to design a program to do that. And then you go out and you get to find a funding source and then tell them about what the problem is, what the opportunity is, and why you and your partners are really well positioned to make some awesome changes in your community or in your region or in the world. And then hopefully you get to convince them to give you the funding to go out and do the thing that you dreamed up. And as I was saying, I was like, actually, I think grant writing's pretty awesome. I think it's a pretty incredible thing that we get to do in our work. You get to use your imagination and the power of your relationships to create something and to create powerful change. So I know I say that as a reminder. I know this month in particular with these LAMP grants that are coming up, it feels stressful, right? You're like trying to get the letter of support and create the evaluation metrics and get the budget together and figure out the match, and it's a lot. But just remember, this is so that we can achieve our dreams, right? And we can achieve our mission and live into our values about making this world better through our work and through sustainable and equitable food systems. So thank you so much to all of our presenters, Renee, Lori, Hannah, Matthew, Bill, Patrick, Bailey, and Kelly. Thank you to my team, Annalena, Melanie, Ellie Baumstein, who helped to plan this and had to duck out because she was sick. We really appreciate everyone putting your time and effort into this. I'm gonna drop in here. We got a lot more resources. Don't sleep on the training with Dr. Barrett Vaughn. It's awesome. We got the recording of session 1 that happened yesterday right here. Session 2 starts tomorrow. We will share all of the recordings. We're gonna share the recording from this webinar, the questions and answers, the slides, the resources. All of that's gonna go on the foodsystemleadershipnetwork.org. We wish you all the best of luck in this next month as you prepare your grants. And please look to the FSLN as a resource. And everyone on this call, just keep in mind, you're not alone in this. There's a whole network of people that are there with you. All right, and with that, we'll bid you adieu. Thank you all.